Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Sampler Wars, where we grab two well-known and beloved samplers and pit them against each other in a ruthless battle of cunning, wit, and music. Or more accurately, we put the gas pedal to the floor and we geek out fully over two awesome machines and how they compare with each other. If you're looking for an in-depth view into the full spec sheet and feature list of these machines, well, there are other channels that cover this deeply and beautifully, so no, you won't be finding that here. What I'll be exploring in this video instead is a look beyond the spec sheet, from a real live, long-term user of both of these amazing devices, trying to convey to you what these things actually feel like in everyday use, what makes them shine, what sucks about each of them, and which one might be better for your particular needs. Since the Deluge is closer in price to the MPC Live, I'll be using the latter for the comparison. If you're already a subscriber, huge welcome back and thank you so much for your support. This is the best job I've ever had and you're the one that makes it possible. If this is your first time here, hi, welcome to the Midlifesynthesist. Let's get started. This video is not sponsored. Whatever your musical tastes, if you're into groove boxes and standalone music production kits, you've either heard of or simply lusted after the Akai MPC line or the Synthstrom Audible Deluge. In my opinion, these two boxes represent two of the top-tier standalone music production suites currently available for people who wish to pursue an on-the-go DAW-less lifestyle with little compromise on flexibility, mobility, and just raw music-making power. Both have grown extensively since their initial launch thanks to multiple major free firmware updates offered by the respective companies, and I think it's pretty safe to say that we will continue to see them mutate and evolve into even more powerful machines. That being said, and even with so many apparent similarities, these two boxes offer completely different approaches to making music, starting with the holy grail of features for me, the user interface. Big screen versus calculator screen. Perhaps the most notable difference between the two front panels is the screen real estate. On the Deluge, the screen is a bare-bones SP404-esque kind of experience. This has the advantage of not offering you a beautiful distraction that can get you sidetracked, while also allowing for the bulk of the CPU power and the virtual memory to focus on what's really important, the music processing. Since the entire Deluge's front panel has virtually every menu option literally spelled out for you and at your reach at all times via its 128 pads, a complicated screen and menu system is not needed to get you where you need to go. Also, the more you use it, the more muscle memory kicks in and the workflow becomes progressively easier and faster. Every SP404 fan out there will testify that there's a certain enjoyment and pride that comes from knowing a machine so well that everything just flows naturally without much thought process behind it. However, that's not to say that this doesn't bring its share of problems. You see, the difference between the SP404 and the Deluge is that the SP404, in essence, is a fairly simple machine. The Deluge, on the other hand, is extremely intricate, complex, capable, and powerful. And in my opinion, it actually suffers from not having a better screen on board. Navigating and searching for synth presets can be a nightmare. Looking for samples and searching your SD card for files can be plainly infuriating if you don't remember the exact pathway to your files. Here, the Deluge is a victim of its own virtuosity, because knowing that the Deluge can do so much, it does feel like a shame to have to see it all it has to offer through such a small peephole. The MPC, on the other hand, is the absolute opposite of the Deluge in terms of screen real estate. You get a crisp, fully colored touchscreen with an overabundance of information at all times. Now, this is a double-edged sword though. On one hand, it makes navigating the menus much easier, and you could arguably not read the manual and still be able to use the MPC to its full potential, since it's all right there and relatively easy to find. On the other hand, not everyone enjoys using touchscreens or computer screens when making music. They can be very distracting, and for some people, they can just suck out all the joy of music making. Also, it could be argued that if you're going to be on a computer anyway, then why not just go for a laptop and a fully featured and all-powerful DAW instead? Though I do understand that reasoning, my defense of the MPC is that its system is so well integrated with the physical knobs and buttons that it feels like a completely cohesive and extremely enjoyable instrument, and not, as some people describe it, an iPad glued to a MIDI controller. Button combos. The Deluge workflow relies heavily on button combos, and when I say heavily, I mean that if you don't know the button combos, you won't be able to use many of the Deluge's main functions. Ergo, you can't really use the Deluge itself. They are involved in everything, from creating audio tracks to defining audio inputs to sequencing on the note grid. This means that quite a few times, even after a while using it, I've had to stop making music and kill my flow to go and check the manual for the function I'm trying to get to. If the Deluge is your only machine, or if it's your main machine, then this might be a non-issue, especially if you intend to truly specialize in it. It might actually make your workflow lightning fast if you absolutely master it, just like those kids who knew how to trigger all the fatalities in Mortal Kombat. However, if you're like me and you enjoy the polygamy of using many music boxes, then maybe, just like me, you will sometimes stop using one of your groove boxes for quite a few weeks before you pick it up again for a new project. When this happened with the Deluge and I went to pick it up again, I had to basically relearn the whole thing and read a good chunk of the manual again to get it to do everything that I wanted. Once I acclimated though, I was once again in love with it, and I now keep a small cheat sheet on my phone just in case. However, every time I stop using it for a while, just like with the Octatrack, I still dread that initial hump of getting to know it again before I can really get the most out of it. Button combos on the MPC exist, but are not essential, meaning that they are there to make your workflow faster, but you can get to those functions via a menu screen if you happen to forget them. This makes the MPC much easier to pick back up after you haven't used it in a while, and also means you won't have to stop making music and go back to the manual if you happen to forget a particular button combo. They exist as an accelerator only and a faster alternative to using the touchscreen, but won't punish you if you can't remember a specific one. Note input. Another huge difference in form and function is the way you input notes into both of these devices. Of course, you can always use an external MIDI controller like the KeyStep on either of these machines, but I want to keep my focus on what these two are like when you're using them with little or no peripherals. The drum pads on the MPC are both velocity sensitive and have aftertouch. This, coupled with their size, make them ideal for finger drumming and live jamming. I do use the piano roll grid for note corrections and for automations, but I'll rarely use them to input actual notes. The touchscreen is capable, but sequencing via the grid on the MPC, in my opinion, is not the fastest nor the most enjoyable experience out there. Also, you get a pretty traditional approach to sequencing, as it does not allow for parameter locking or note probability. The pads, on the other hand, are class leading and an absolute riot to use. Finger drumming also tends to give the drums a more natural feel, and it's easier to make looser sounding beats, which lends the MPC well for genres like lo-fi hip-hop, as well as rock and pop songs. As for synth tracks and virtual instruments, the 4x4 grid does feel a bit constrained, as with Pad Perform, it's basically just a 2-octave keyboard. It's usable, but it does feel like it's on the tighter side of things. The Deluge is once again almost the polar opposite of the MPC in this regard. The small RGB pads don't have velocity nor aftertouch, but the synth engines themselves do respond to both from an external controller. Their diminutive size and layout all but rules out live finger drumming as a real possibility, especially with people with chubbier hands like me. However, the beautiful and extensive pad fill panel is a sequence-based musician's dream. Programming original and complex drum sequences and exciting, complex melodies on the Deluge is truly a delight and dead easy to boot. The sequencer itself is akin to an electron box, as in you can assign probability to each note and parameter lock as well, giving you that awesome electron, unpredictable and generative feel in your music. It really does feel liberating to make music on such a large canvas of possibilities, and that just might be my favorite feature on the Deluge. Also, in scale mode, you get a beautifully lit myriad of notes where you can get lost in for hours, and finding interesting new musical ideas is a breeze. Sample slicing and mangling. This would not be a Sampler Wars episode if we didn't talk about actual sampling. Well, both these machines offer very different options. Sample slicing on an MPC is easy, fun, and quick. Akai have really perfected the art form and offer you one of the best and most complete sampling experiences out there outside of something like the Octatrack or Ableton Live. The touchscreen is obviously a huge standout here, as it gives you a high-resolution waveform to explore and dissect. You can fine-tune the start and end points of your slices either on the touchscreen or using the cue links. You can time stretch, pitch shift, reverse, etc., as well as adding other effects later on. But for me, the greatest thing about sampling on an MPC is the lazy chop feature. Here you can hit the pads as the sample runs, and you can go assigning the start points of your chops. After that, you can fine-tune until you have it just right. Process the chops, and bam, you have a new sample kit in seconds. It literally doesn't get any easier than that. Sample chopping on the Deluge is not my favorite thing in the world, to be honest, and that's because instead of a screen, you see the waveform on the pad matrix. It's certainly usable and it does get the job done, but I have a hard time really knowing where I am and what I'm doing, as it's pretty easy to get lost with such a low resolution. That being said, however, the Deluge's sample engine is actually pretty impressive. It can automatically adjust the tempo of your sample to your song and can either pitch shift or time stretch independently, as well as reverse and further mangle your samples. As to the actual quality and limits of both time stretching and pitch shifting on both of these devices, if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to make a video doing a stress test on both. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. Hi guys, Midlife Editor here. There's still a lot more to talk about in this comparison, and I was wondering how to make sure that I would cover most of the topics that you're interested in regarding this MPC versus Deluge sampler war. You see, the problem with these YouTube videos is that the conversation we're having can sometimes be a bit one-sided, so I thought we could mix things up a bit, and this time I'm asking you to share your doubts and questions and tell me what keeps you up at night when debating over which one of these devices is the one for you, and I'll try to answer as much as I can in the second part of this video. I want to thank the wonderful people who already pitched in with their ideas in my community posts. Going forward, I'll be pursuing new ways to have you guys have more input in the content of this channel, so if you haven't already, now's a pretty good time to subscribe so you can have your say into the subjects we discuss here. I want to really thank you for watching and hope you're finding this comparison useful, or at least entertaining. I'll see you around in part 2. There is a feature on both of these machines that is absolutely killer. The MPC does tend to tap out sooner than the Deluge. Flexibility and power of this thing, it is one of my favorite looping devices ever. Make for a truly creative space. It's some of the most fun I've ever had making music, even competing against some of my analog gear, to be honest.